Hello, and today I'll be doing an interview with Warren Sparrow. He has over 28 years of mental health experience, and I'm hoping to record this for preservation and getting to know this person better. So, what was your specific job in the mental health field?
I worked in a specific mental health program called the Clubhouse Model, and within a year or so, I moved up to become the director of a small non-profit clubhouse, and I started here in Rutherford County at a place called Magnolia House that was on Main Street in Forest City, and then soon after that I kind of specialised in starting the clubhouses, and I eventually started 4 different clubhouses, worked in 6 of them, starting 4 from scratch, and moved all over the world doing that. Back to Australia, Indiana, Connecticut, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, and just had a great time doing it, you know.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
What specifically led you to being interested in this field and got into, doing all this type of work?
Well, my undergraduate degree was in rehabilitation science, which is all about just working with different kinds of disabilities, trying to get people as functional as possible, trying to get some people back into the workforce to have, just a sort of a normal life that wasn't just centered around their mental illness. I think the mental health piece was a little bit by accident. I was living in Dallas, Texas at the time, and but I've got family here. My grandfather was here, and I'd been here many times, and I decided when I was going to graduate, I was either going to get a job in Rutherford County or I was going to go back to Australia. So I contacted my grandfather, and he kind of looked around and sent me some leads, and I applied for a job and I got it. And didn't really know what it was, and fell in love with it. And then just continued on that path for all those years.
Seems like a lot of people do that sort of thing, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, rehabilitation it's a very, very broad field. So I could have ended up in any number of things, but I really liked the mental health piece and enjoyed it.
Are you still working in the mental health or doing any rehabilitation stuff for other people? Or
no, well, a little bit. I still supervise some graduate and undergraduate students that are social workers that are in their, doing their practicum field placements. I've had a relationship with a mental health program out in Dallas for many years, and I do their field placement supervision remotely. And that's not much. It's a couple hours a week. But I enjoy working with the students. Keeps my head in the game.
How was life before America? Because you talk about, your family life and all the other stuff, but I would like to maybe learn a little bit more about that. How's that?
Oh, geez, they were pretty wild days. I left school when I was 15, 10th grade. And back then, it was different times, A lot of people went to try to get into trades and trade schools and things like that. And I went to work in a family business. And, but being 15 and going to work with a bunch of adults, you get thrust into this new world, And I was still living at home, and, that age, driving for the first time and getting cars and going to the pub and having your first drink because the drinking age is a little bit different. And, so you know, it was pretty wild back then, you know, and I think, you know, when I moved here, I moved over here for a purpose, you know, I wanted to get an education and, you know, so, you know, my life changed dramatically, but that was intentional, you know.
Yeah. Was there like any other reason you moved over here? Was there like, you know, some other thing? Because that it seems like that's the main reason, you know, for the education and all that. But I kind of want to like, you know, think about the deeper stuff I thought behind that. You know,
well,
at the time, or if there was anything, you know.
You know, growing up in Australia, Australia is it's the smallest continent on the planet. It's the largest island, you know, and it's very isolated. So even growing up, Australians, we're bombarded with international news, you know, and everyone, you know, most people take an interest in that. So the world is, you know, you learn is a much bigger place than where you're living, you know, and I think that is a bit of a cultural difference here to the United States. And, you know, and having had family here, my grandparents, my grandfather from Rutherford County, Dr. Harold Lane, his name was, Michael's grandfather as well. You know, he was a veteran in World War II, met my Australian grandmother, so my grandmother was a war bride. And so I've always had that connection here to the States. So I kind of had that family draw. You know, if I was going to travel somewhere, it made sense to come over here, you know, because I had support. My mother was living here at the time as well. And, you know, and I thought, well, I want to make a change. I want to go to school. You know, if I got a chance to do that in another country, I'd be better off for that, you know.
Yeah.
So that was really...
Like over here, it's kind of more normal to have those super long, you know, trips across to another state.
A lot of Aussies travel. I mean, if you ever get to travel, you know, you'll meet them. We're everywhere, you know.
Speaking of travel, I also know that you went across the ocean in like, you know, one of those boats. You want to maybe speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that was with my grandfather in 1980, and I was still a young lad, and I actually turned 18 during that trip. My grandfather had fallen in love with the ocean from his time in the Navy, and he had learned to sail, and around a couple of years prior to 1980, he'd purchased a boat, and just a single mast, it's called a sloop, sailboat, 38 foot, which is not terribly big, and said he was going to circumnavigate the world. He sent a letter to my mother in '78 and said, I'm going to travel, I'm going to sail around the world, you know, in a couple of years. And he was just informing her. And I got home from work, and I had just started work. And my mother said, look, hey, we got a letter from your grandfather, and in 2 years' time, he's going to sail around the world, and you're going to go with him. I went, okay. I was still living at home and working in a family business, and my mother basically saved half of my pay every week and put it away, and 2 years later handed me a passport and a few $1,000s and said, go see the world. So that's how I ended up on that trip. I got here 3 months before we left and helped get the boat ready and met the crew, and we took off, and we headed to Australia. So I went as far as Tahiti. My brother met me there. My grandfather never went beyond Australia. He had some back issues. So, but I got to sail with him later on a couple other trips.
Changing direction again, Ian. I also heard you were in a pretty bad accident.
Yeah.
You know, what is that about? Are you feeling better? Or?
Well, I'm probably 4 years into this, and I'm probably about as better as I'm going to get. So I've been a motorcycle rider since I was like 8 years old, and that's a lot of years. And in fact, that was one of the things that I really love about this area. There's fantastic motorcycle roads, some of the best in the country. And so when I moved back here 6 years ago, you know, I was already had a motorbike and whatever. I had an accident on the way home from a, you know, 3 or 4 day weekend trip, and just, you know, geez, we'd done 1,000 miles that 3 days, and I crashed 8 miles from home. Went off the road. It was a bad storm. Couldn't see where I was going, and hit a guardrail and have a spinal cord injury, and which, you know, I have not been able to go back to work full time. And yeah, so it was pretty bad accident. Almost didn't make it, but glad that I did. And I'm back up on 2 feet and walking, and, you know, trying to make sense of all that stuff.
But final question:
Yeah.
if you had some tips for some people who want to get in the mental health field, what would those be?
You know, I think the education piece is important, but there are different avenues into the mental health field that didn't exist 30 years ago. Peer specialists, there's different kinds of training programs now, but certainly the education, I think, is the most important thing. But also, I think the way the system works now, you've got to have, you know, a higher degree and certifications and all kinds of stuff. It's a little bit harder than it was when I was in it. Although, you know, I went to graduate school and stuff too. It's not easy to find the right place to work. Because there just aren't a lot of real good mental health services around. You know, the clubhouse model that I worked in it really fit who I was as a person. I liked its focus. I liked the relationships between the members of the clubhouse and the staff. They were really based more on, you know, a professional relationship and almost like a friendship, rather than, you know, I'm the clinician, you're the client, and I know better. You know, so I think the philosophy of the program is important to really assess before you sort of dive in. Although, you know, you've got to start somewhere, so, you know, don't be afraid to jump around and keep your eyes open for the next best opportunity, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, Warren, for coming in, and thanks to you all for watching. This has been Braden Ruff with ICN, and we're out. How's that? How's that?